The rise of female genital mutilation rates in the Western world is said to be a cultural issue by the followers of a religion who ignore the fact their religion shapes their culture, and they ignore FGM's explicit basis in their religion's scripture. The practice of FGM affects hundreds of millions of girls. This video looks at the role of a religion to expose its promotion of this disturbing practice designed to control a woman's sexuality and to benefit men. You are about to find out that Islam, not culture, is to blame. So FGM is a human rights violation. It's performed without consent, and it perpetuates gender inequality, undermines dignity, and violates international laws protecting against cruel and inhumane treatment. But Islam doesn't respect females, which is why it does promote FGM. So to understand the role of Islam in FGM, we must first look at what Islam's texts say, because it's from the words of Allah and Muhammad that Islamic law is derived from. And in this hadith, we learn that circumcision is part of a person's fitra. Fitra refers to the innate natural state of the human, so that if we follow the fitra, we follow our natural disposition given to us by Allah to make us more perfect. Circumcision is part of the fitra. The general laws of the Sharia or Islamic law apply equally to men and women unless the injunction specifically states a gender. That hadith you just saw shows circumcision is obligatory and applies to both sexes. Scholars agree. In Islam, circumcision is required for males and females to achieve the natural state, which is contradictory, isn't it? You have to have a part of your body cut off to be natural. So why did Allah give you something that you need to remove to be natural in the first place? It makes no sense. More evidence that FGM applies to females is seen in this hadith, where Muhammad says that during intercourse, when the circumcised parts of the male and the female touch, washing is required. By making a general reference to circumcised male and female parts, Muhammad is making it very clear that circumcision of females is not only permitted in Islam, but it is the normal state. Aisha also says when the circumcised parts of the male and female touch, washing is required. Aisha was born a Muslim and tells us she was circumcised, so FGM must be lawful under Islamic law. Aisha's nieces were also circumcised during the time of Muhammad, so clearly there is no objections to FGM, because if there was, this would not be happening. In this hadith, we hear about a lady who is the cutter of vaginas. I believe that is what the Arabic says. This is yet more evidence that FGM was a normal part of life during the time of Muhammad, yet Allah never outlawed it. If it's not outlawed, then it's permissible. A hadith graded sahih by some scholars but weak by others explains some of the benefits of FGM. It's more desirable for the husband. Because of the hadiths you've just seen, there's no dispute amongst the scholars that FGM is legitimate and permissible in Islam. This book of Islamic law also shows there's no dispute about FGM being permissible in Islam. Islam QA say they are not aware of any dispute amongst the scholars or aware of any texts that show FGM is haram. So all scholars say FGM is halal. But there are varying opinions as to whether girls must have FGM done or should have FGM done. According to Islam QA, the Shafis and the Hanbali school of Islamic law say FGM is obligatory, while the Hanafis and the Maliki say it's recommended. Islam Web agree with them. Now, the Shafi law book called The Reliance of the Traveller says the Hanbali school of Islamic law actually believe FGM is recommended. And Ibn Qudamah, who's a Hanbali scholar, says FGM is an honor for females, but it's not obligatory. That's a typo there. So the Hanbali school may be saying that FGM is recommended rather than obligatory. But recommended still means strongly preferred. The Hanafis say it's recommended, and yet this scholar discusses when to circumcise girls to show that FGM is normal to him. The Maliki school says FGM is recommended, but this scholar quotes Imam Malik, who's the founder of the Maliki school, who says he prefers girls to have FGM. So recommended still equals preferred. A preferred view means girls are more likely to have it done if the rules of what is being recommended are followed. This scholar says the correct view is that FGM is obligatory, and most scholars agree with this opinion. He disagrees with the view that it's only recommended. Obligatory or recommended, all Islam's greatest scholars say a girl should have FGM done or must have it done. Okay, Islam clearly does encourage and allow FGM, but how much of a vagina should be removed? Well, the guidance is poor because there's no authentic explanation of how much to cut. The general opinion is to remove the clitoral hood entirely, and some scholars say not to remove all of the clitoris. This scholar points out that some of the clitoris itself is removed. He says more of the clitoris remains, the more likely she will engage in lesbianism. So apparently, the more of her clitoris remains, the more likely she is to be a lesbian. FGM apparently stops that. It's incredible, isn't it? So anyway, So whilst we know that at least the hood is removed, other opinions do clearly indicate some removal of the clitoris itself may occur. Ibn Taymiyyah, this scholar, tells us that little girls are mutilated because God wants to reduce her desire. So it seems in Islam, the belief is that if she's not circumcised, she will become lustful, which apparently females are not allowed to do. Reducing female desire, but not reducing it so much that she refuses her husband, is a main reason for FGM. Also, there's some alleged improvement to the appearance of the vagina, so that's another reason. And it also states here that circumcision is a sign of the Abrahamic faith, which underlines the Islamic basis for this practice. In fact, by claiming FGM is the natural state, and Muslims claim that Islam was the first and only true religion, means FGM is basically an Islamic invention. Other reasons for FGM are that it apparently makes the female's face brighter and improves the feeling for men, whilst reducing irritability in girls during childhood. So basically, FGM is performed for the benefit of men. So how old should she be? Well, the general view is that a girl should be around 10 years old when FGM is performed so that she can take the pain. However, this is a guide. It could be a few years earlier, it could be a few years later. Either way, the girl is going to remember it and will possibly suffer lifelong trauma. Here, Malik says there's no particular age. It can be done quite young. If I look somewhere, I think it does have, it doesn't give an age, I don't think. Have a look on there anyway. I think that's just to show you the different views on the age. There isn't really an actual opinion as such, but it's sort of around 7 to 10. That's probably the guide. Yes, and with this scholar as well, this sheikh says the circumcision of a young girl, some of them considered puberty, some considered around 9 years of age, some say 10. So again, it's around that kind of area. The age thing doesn't really matter. So whilst male circumcision is celebrated, the girl doesn't even get that. Her mutilation is said to be kept quiet. Okay, so there's no celebration of it, but for men there is. I think circumcision of men is also male genital mutilation. That's a different topic. So anyway, a common claim is that FGM is an African or cultural issue, not a religious one. Well, we've seen that Islam fully supports the practice of FGM. And as you will now see, the high prevalence of FGM around the Islamic world debunks this claim. The distribution of Islam correlates perfectly with the distribution of FGM because Islam is the only religion that supports it. FGM is common in almost every country dominated by Islam. You can actually see that on that graph there. It shows the issue isn't just Africa, which many people say. Look at the Far East and the Middle East. They're not African countries, are they? So let's look at FGM rates in the Islamic world. Let's start with Africa. It is true that many countries practicing FGM are African, but the majority of those African countries are Islamic. The fact is, other countries do practice FGM, but it doesn't change the fact that Islam's got a role in promoting FGM. Other countries circumcise males. Does this mean male circumcision isn't Islamic? These are the sort of arguments that lots of Muslims use to try and remove Islam from its role in FGM. In fact, 11 of the top 12 worst African countries for FGM are Islamic. And out of the top 20, 18 are either Islamic or half the population are Muslims. And in fact, one of those countries, I think Eritrea, may or may not be a Christian or Islamic majority country. So it actually might be 19 out of 20. FGM in the Arab world. So the birthplace of Islam is not Africa, as you know. And when we look at FGM in the secretive Arab world, we see the same terrifying reality we just saw in Africa. FGM is everywhere. In Oman, the rates of FGM can be up to 78%, or as high as 98% in some areas, according to this study. In the Yemen, 89% of women had been subjected to FGM in some regions, according to this study. In Iraq, FGM rates are as high as 45 to 50%, though this does appear to be falling, with 40% of girls under 19 apparently now being mutilated. So it's still frightening, but it's getting better. In Kuwait, 38% of women were found to be circumcised. In certain areas of Iran, 55.7% of women were found to have had FGM. In Saudi Arabia, 18% of women surveyed had undergone FGM. I actually am not too sure about this study because I think the women may have been foreigners. So I would probably not use this, but I'm sure it is happening there. Let's have a look at FGM in the Far East. In Indonesia, almost half of all women had FGM. Some methods of carrying it out include using chickens to peck at the child's vagina. And I'm sorry, I almost get upset saying that. In Malaysia, 99.3% of women have had FGM, and most believed FGM was compulsory in Islam, because it basically is. Other data suggests FGM rates in Malay women is as high as 93%. FGM had no history in Malaysia or Indonesia before Islam arrived. Does now. So, conclusion. FGM is internationally recognized as a violation of human rights. It is child abuse, and there's no denying the views of scholars in Islam have influenced the practice of FGM for 1400 years. FGM is not just an African issue. The majority of African countries with the highest rates of FGM are countries dominated by Islam. Islamic countries worldwide share this issue. Countries that had no record of FGM now have some of the highest rates of this abuse in the world, only after being conquered by Islam. There's no medical reason for FGM. It's a patriarchal precept with the purpose of controlling a woman's sexual desires to please the husband. It inflicts serious pain and trauma, which can endanger a child's life, cause lifelong physical and mental health issues, as well as impair her ability to conceive. FGM is called a cultural issue, but Islam greatly shapes cultures, and Islam supports FGM. So once again, Islam violates the rights of women, and yet again, Muslims make excuses for it to protect Islam. And yet again, it's people like me, Islamophobes, who are trying to raise awareness of it to stop it. I do so for the sake of all girls, Muslim and non-Muslim, because I care about them both. This was Debunking Islam. Thank you for listening.